People will often ask me why I don't have children. Have you seen these movies? We're talking creepy children on the Horror Movie Syllabus. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor, your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and downright notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the Horror Movie Syllabus, I recommend you check out our introduction video and the link down below because it'll give you a good idea of how the Horror Movie Syllabus works. In short, though, what we're going to do is we're looking at a particular subgenre of horror, and we're going to look at 3 movies that fall into that subgenre to get an idea of what the subgenre is about. Today, the subgenre we're looking at is creepy children. And creepy children is something that really permeates horror movies. There's a lot of creepy kids that wind up in horror movies all over the place. So there's enough creepy children that will wind up in other subgenres, but there's also enough that it warrants having its own subgenre to itself. And that's what we're going to look at right now. We're going to look at the movies where a creepy child is either the centerpiece of the movie or a really key component of the movie or a memorable part of the movie. So the creepy children are front and center in the movies that we're going to talk about today. As usual, we've organized the movies into levels, which are undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate. And in this case, those movies are going to be the level of quality of the film, increasing levels of quality. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into the movies. The first movie about creepy children that we're talking about today, our undergraduate level selection, is Pet Sematary. You'll notice I don't even have a DVD of just Pet Sematary. It's part of a collection, and the reason for that will become apparent very, very soon. Pet Sematary came out in 1989. It is based on a Stephen King book of the same name, and it is a extremely popular movie amongst a certain generation of fans. At least that's my hypothesis, and the reason why I say that is because I do not like this movie. I really don't like this movie. In fact, I'm going to be straight with you. This movie wasn't on the syllabus until about a week ago. I was not going to put it on here. It was going to make extra credit, and a movie that I'm going to talk about in extra credit was actually going to take its place. And I thought that, because I like that other movie better. I don't really like Pet Sematary. But if I was being honest with myself, there are a lot of people who love this movie, so my opinion is a minority opinion, to say the least. And B, I had a lot more to say about Pet Sematary than that other movie, so I felt like maybe it was a better selection for the syllabus. Now, Pet Sematary, if for some reason you don't know, is, again, based on a Stephen King novel about a family that buys a house near a pet cemetery that has mystical powers that can raise the dead. But as their friendly neighbor lets them know, sometimes dead is better. That's the famous line from the movie, and actually is a very, very good line. I will admit that. But I don't want to say any more than that in case, by some chance, you haven't seen the movie. Let you have a chance to let it all unfold naturally. But let's talk a little bit about why I don't like it and so many others do. So as I noted, the movie came out in 1989, and at that point, I am, mid-teens? Yeah, that's about right. And I don't know if I actually saw it when it came out. I think I saw it when I was a little bit older. I was probably closer to 20 when I saw it. And I think that's a key part of the impact of this movie. I feel like if you saw it at a young enough age, if you kind of grew up with this, if this was an early entry into horror for you, you have a certain nostalgia for it and affection for it that persists to this day. That's probably the only reason I can think of why people are so fervently adore this movie. Some people even think it's their favorite movie. It's not a particularly good movie. And I say this as objectively as I can because I went back and rewatched it not too long ago to see if I was being unfair to it, if I was being a little bit overly harsh on it. And I don't think that I am. The movie it has a feel of like a TV movie to it, the way it's shot, the way it's performed. The actors, by and large, aren't particularly great. The guy playing the lead, whose name escapes me at the moment, is not particularly great. Denise Crosby, who I actually really like from Star Trek, not particularly great. Fred Gwynne, who plays the neighbor, actually is quite good. He's got this ridiculous accent, but it doesn't matter because he's captivating. He's a lot of fun. He's maybe the best part of the movie. I will concede that Fred Gwynne is really good in the movie as Jed, the neighbor. And the little boy playing Gage is actually pretty good. I will make concessions on those things. I'm not going to try to sit here and tell you that it's all bad and it's all terrible. But by and large, the people holding the movie together, the parents, they're not great. They don't have a lot of chemistry. They aren't really bringing an A game, and that's a big part of why the movie doesn't hit for me. Also, just budget wise, it feels a little low budget. And then narratively speaking, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it's a thing I wonder whether or not the book makes a better case for why the protagonists of the film make the decisions that they make. Again, the theme of sometimes dead is better is really prevalent in the movie. And yet they make decisions that they shouldn't be making. You know, you've got your next door neighbor warning you not to do something and then helping you do it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And that really, really takes me out of the movie. It really was a hard thing for me to get into, both when I saw it originally and when I rewatched it again, I don't know, about a month or two ago. So to me, those are flaws that the movie has that are not subjective, but objective. Those are things that are true statements, not just like, oh, my opinion. I guess you could say the acting being bad is maybe my opinion. Some people might think the acting performance is really good, but I'd be surprised. I think that those are mostly objective comments, that these are true facts. And I feel like if you love this movie, that's fine. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't, but you're ignoring these things or you're letting them slide. And generally we do that when we're feeling nostalgic. I think I talked about this a little bit in our slasher icons video or our slasher video, or maybe I just talked about it in the comments. I honestly don't remember, but nostalgia plays a big part in it because I love those movies. I love those slasher movies from the 80s. They're not particularly well made or well acted either, but I forgive all of that. I don't care, because I grew up with those movies and I have a deep affection for them. And that's what I think is the case with Pet Sematary. I think that people have a deep affection for it for nostalgia purposes. And that objectively speaking, maybe they could acknowledge it's not the greatest movie, but they don't care. They love it anyways. And if that's the case, great. I'm glad you guys like it. I wish I liked it better. I kind of wonder if maybe if I read the book, I would appreciate it more, or if I just dislike it even more because it doesn't measure up to the book. I don't know. I've heard the book is really, really good. But I wish I liked this movie better. I wish I could be part of the club that really loves this movie, but unfortunately, I am not. That said, I acknowledge that you guys love it, and I acknowledge that it is significant that you guys love it. I acknowledge that there's that it's noteworthy, that it's an important film, especially as a representation of a creepy child. And it warrants having a spot on the syllabus. So while I initially was going to keep it off because it's my syllabus, I've had a change of heart. I want to be, it's still my syllabus. It is. A lot of the picks will reflect my opinion or my biases, but I also want to try to make a point of highlighting films that are noteworthy, even if I don't particularly care for them. I've done it most recently in the horror romance video. I think it's important that we talk about Pet Sematary and acknowledge that there is a large fan base that really, really adores the movie. Now, there was a sequel to the movie that Pet Sematary 2 that I have not seen because, again, I didn't like the original, so I wouldn't bother to watch the sequel. And I've never really heard anybody say anything about the sequel being particularly noteworthy or particularly bad either. I think it's just kind of there. People have the affection for the original. I don't think anybody seems to really have a strong opinion one way or the other about the sequel to the movie. They also did a remake to the movie. I think it was last year. And the remake... I did go see the remake because I was curious if it was going to be any better than the original. It is not. It's arguably worse. I mean, it's got a better production value. So one of the things I complained about the original is that it looks kind of cheap. It looks kind of made for TV. The remake doesn't have that issue. It is a better made movie from a pure like aesthetic standpoint, but it's not a better movie. In fact, whatever charm the original has, which I'll acknowledge there's a little bit of charm, is gone from the remake. The only reason to watch the remake is to see how they flipped or twisted the original. For the most part, the movie is a beat by beat recreation of the original movie, but for a significant difference. And I won't say it here because it's a spoiler, even though they literally showed this in the trailer. And it's the only interesting thing about the movie is the difference between the original and this one. And so they shouldn't have shown that in the trailer, but frankly, it's probably the only reason I went to go see the movie is because they showed that in the trailer. But that's all they had. They shot their one shot in the trailer. That there was nothing else about the movie that was interesting. The ending of the movie is slightly better than the ending of the original, I'd say. Similar theme to the ending, but not the same images. And I think the imagery at the end of the remake is maybe a little bit better. But that's about it. That's about all I can say about the movie being any good in any way, shape, or form. I didn't like the original. I did not like the remake. I know a lot of people didn't like the remake. I think a lot of the fans of the original really hated the remake. And again, I think it's because they have a deep affection for the original. I don't have that, so I was able to look at the remake objectively, and I still agree with them. I still think it's not really worth your time. But if you're curious about it and haven't seen it, I will say that you should probably see it for no other reason, so that you can make your own decision. Don't listen to just saying my opinion and discard it, because there's a whole bunch of other people out there who really like this movie, and you might wind up being one of them. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. I would like to know what you think. And if you are a Pet Sematary lover and want to defend the film or challenge some of my supposedly objective thoughts on the movie, please do in the comments below. I will definitely be respectful to your opinion as much as I've tried to be here. Hopefully I haven't disrespected anybody's opinion by saying the movie is not good. It's just my opinion that the movie is not good, and I recognize that other people feel very differently about it, and they're very passionate about it. If you have that passion, let's hear in the comments below. Share it, because there are people who might not have seen it, and I think that people who want to make a case for it should be heard as well. So in the comments below, tell us why you love Pet Sematary if you do, and if you're with me and you think it's overrated, tell us that too, because I like it when people say that I'm right. So looking forward to hearing what you say in the comments. The second movie we're talking about today, our graduate level movie, is Orphan. Orphan came out in 2009, and it's another one of those movies where people seem to have strong opinions of it one way or another. I personally really like the movie. It's if you don't know, it's about a young couple with two kids who adopt a third child, who seems to be like the perfect child, but because this is a horror movie and not a Hallmark movie, she is not quite what she seems. And as usual, I don't want to spoil movies for you. And in this case, I really don't want to spoil it for you, because the movie goes some interesting places that you probably wouldn't see coming. And that's, I think, why the movie is a little bit polarizing. I think that's partly why some people love it and some people hate it. The movie is well made and well acted. It stars Peter Sarsgaard and Vera Farmiga as the parents. Vera Farmiga, a grossly underrated actress. We think we've talked about her before, but if we haven't, we definitely will be. She is an exceptional actress, very underrated, and she's incredibly good here. But the scene stealer, the star of the show, really is the actress playing the little girl, Isabel Fuhrman, I believe her name is, and she's exceptional here. She gives an incredible performance, really just absolutely astounding performance, and that's kind of the key to this movie. Is her and how much you believe in her, because this movie goes some really wild places. It is not what you expect. I don't think you'll see where it's going. It goes from being kind of a really good creepy child movie to being kind of a next level, like, legendary creepy child movie, worthy of making the syllabus. And I think that's where people either are in or they're out, is whether or not they'll go along for the ride on this kind of crazy movie. I definitely went along for the ride. I liked how wild and out there it went. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, and I'm trying not to spoil it for the people who haven't. I will say this, though. The movie kind of has that takes that turn, and I think that by doing so, it kind of undercuts some of the tension and uncomfortableness that it sets up right before that. It's very tough to say this without spoiling it, but there's a part in the movie that gets wildly uncomfortable, like really, really uncomfortable. And then the movie goes into another direction that kind of deflates the uncomfortableness of that scene that I kind of would have liked to have seen pulled out or extended or wrote out a little bit longer. That said, the places this movie goes, I certainly didn't see it coming, and it's borderline campy. I mean, it might actually be campy, but it doesn't matter. It's a fun movie. I really enjoyed this. There's a lot of people that really like this movie. There's also a lot of people who probably don't like this movie for the same reason, but I don't want to oversell it, but I really think this movie is a lot of fun. I think it's got a good level of creep, and tension and dread and awkwardness, and it's got a very, to me at least, satisfying conclusion that made it so much fun and so memorable that I had to include it here in the syllabus. If you've seen the movie, I'd like to hear if you agree with my assessment of it, or if you think, kind of like some people do, that it really is kind of trashy or whatever. So leave a comment down below. Try not to spoil it for the people who haven't seen it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the movie and whether or not you kind of align with me about whether this is worthy of the syllabus, whether it's noteworthy enough to be on this syllabus. Because I have a special place in my heart for it, and I have a feeling that maybe some of you guys do as well. And the last movie we're talking about today, our postgraduate level movie, is The Omen. Now, The Omen came out in 1976, and it is what I like to call a bona fide modern classic. Now, I know that some of the younger viewers of the horror movie syllabus don't see a movie from 1976 as being all that modern, and we've talked about it. We talked about it in the introduction video about modern movies being 1970 on, and I won't get too deep into it here. But what I'll say here is, as opposed to the classic Universal movies and things like that from like the 1930s and the 40s, 50s, this movie is, from what you think of as modern movie making sensibility, a true classic. And it really kind of shouldn't be, based on the subject matter of it. When you realize what it's about, it sounds like a B movie. I mean, in short, if you don't know what it is, basically a man and his wife have a child that is the Antichrist. That's what it's about. Like, they're raising the child of the devil, devil child. And when you say it like that, it sounds like a B movie. It sounds kind of silly. But this movie is very not. It's dead serious, and it totally works. I think part of the reason why it works, why it's kind of thought of as a prestige movie, if you will, a classic prestige movie, is the pedigree of it. It's directed by Richard Donner, a legendary director, Richard Donner, and it stars Gregory Peck, who very famous actor of the time. Think like George Clooney of his time. So, George Clooney making a movie, it automatically gets thought of as more of a highbrow or serious movie, a noteworthy movie than say if Zac Efron is the one doing the movie. That's just real. So think of Gregory Peck in that way. Their involvement in the movie elevates it from being like horror schlock to being thought of as something more important than that. And you saw some of this in the 1970s, and The Omen is one of those movies that got thought of as something more important or more intelligent than your average horror fair schlock. And it lives up to that. The quality of the movie is extremely good. It's why we've chosen it as the postgraduate level movie. It's really, really well made, really well acted. And again, while the story is, if you boil it down, kind of schlocky, it's told in a way that is believable and chilling. It's really a disturbing movie. If you can put yourself into the position of the parents, that can be a really unsettling and upsetting situation to be in. And I think the movie capitalizes on that. The movie is also full of some incredibly infamous scenes that are incredibly memorable and often deeply disturbing. And, trigger warning for people who have concerns about like suicide, things like that. So there's some tough stuff in the movie, especially considering the year that it came out. It's hard to say too much more about the movie without spoiling some of the plot points that I think are grabbers. Suffice to say, it's an excellent movie, both in terms of narrative and in terms of filmmaking, not to mention across the board good acting. the little kid playing Damien, the Antichrist. And if you ever heard the name Damien, this is where it's coming from. He's really, really good too. Just has a creepy look to him. It's not so much his acting, so much he just looks the part. Kind of mean to say that about a child, I suppose, but there it is. He looks like the devil, man. Everything works in this movie. It all comes together really well, and it holds up extremely well. It's from 1976, so it's before a lot of you were even born, but it holds up really, really well. I don't feel like you'll look at it and feel like, oh, this is too dated for me to watch. It holds up exceptionally well. There were a series of sequels that came out after it, which are diminishing returns, as I like to say. None of them are as good as the original, and they're all worth a watch, but they're not. Especially if you like the original, if you're really into this kind of movie, watch the sequels. They're pretty fun. They kind of follow. I don't want to say what they follow because I don't want to spoil anything, but they're fine. They're okay, but they're not as good as the original. And as they go on, they get worse as they go on. There was also a somewhat notorious remake done in the early 2000s with Liev Schreiber and Julia Stiles, two actors that I really, really like. I like them very much, and as a result, I think I'm a little bit more forgiving to that remake than other people because I really like them so much that I want to give the remake a pass, but it's kind of universally despised. People really dislike the remake. I'm not quite sure why it does a kind of a point by point, beat by beat remake of the original. I guess what you could say is arguably it's just not necessary. Again, the original holds up so well that you don't need to modernize it so much. It doesn't really add much to the movie. Again, I do like those two actors quite a bit, and I think they're good in the movie, but if you've seen the original, you don't need to see the remake. And if I was going to recommend one to you, it's going to be the original, which I am doing right now. I'm recommending to you. If you haven't seen The Omen, you need to see The Omen. It is oftentimes going to be like a top 10 horror movie, period. Not just in the creepy children subgenre, but horror genre. People rave about it. In fact, I caught a little bit of flack for it not being included in the religion subgenre because it seems like a logical place for it to be. It's possible that a lot of you filling out your own syllabus might be putting it in that subgenre, and it does fit there. But I had to put it here because to me it is the quintessential creepy child movie. It really is like the standard of creepy children, so I had to include it here. For me, it belongs here in the creepy child subgenre. And so I'd be curious to see, though, for those of you that have seen it, if you included it on your syllabus, where did you include it in your syllabus? And I'd be surprised if you dislike The Omen. Maybe there are people who feel like it doesn't hold up as well, or find it to be a little slow or something like that. It's got 1970s pacing, for example. So I'd like to hear that. If you have opinions that are a little less effusive than mine, share them in the comments below because I want to be as balanced as possible when we talk about these things for people who haven't seen it. But I stand by what I say. If you haven't seen The Omen, you owe it to yourself to see it for your horror education and because I think you'll wind up really enjoying it. So those are our picks for the creepy children subgenre, but as usual, we're going to leave you with a few extra credit movies to look at. The first one I want to talk about is Children of the Corn. In Children of the Corn, another Stephen King movie like Pet Sematary, was the movie I was going to include as our undergraduate film, and then swapped out for Pet Sematary. And the reason why is I actually really like Children of the Corn. Watching it now as opposed to when I was younger, it's a little slower, not quite as good as I remember being. The acting maybe not as great as I remember being, but I still find the kids to be effectively very creepy. So again, a really good representation of the creepy children subgenre. But I had to admit that Pet Sematary is much more influential than Children of the Corn is. Children of the Corn probably means more to me than it does to the world at large. I think that it's a notorious film. It's well known. People know about it, but I don't know that people really have strong feelings about it one way or the other. Maybe they dislike it or maybe they like it, but I don't think anybody loves it or hates it. I actually like it quite a bit, but again, it maybe doesn't hold up quite as well. I did go to school with the little girl who played Sarah. She wasn't a little girl, but she was an adult by the time I went to college with her. But Anne Marie McAvoy was her name. She's a lovely, lovely woman. I don't think she acts anymore. We haven't kept in touch, but she was very sweet in college. And when she told me that she had been in Children of the Corn as a child actor, I kind of geeked out and fanboyed a little bit because I liked that movie. So I kind of always felt a little bit of a connection to that movie because I knew Anne Marie in college. But I have to admit that it's not the most powerful movie. It's not the most noteworthy of movies. It is a really good representation of creepy children. So if you like creepy children movies, Children of the Corn is one you should see. There's like 72 sequels to the movie and a remake and stuff. And they're all basically garbage. They're all kind of direct-to-video garbage that sometimes tie into the movie, sometimes they don't. I haven't even seen all of them. In fact, I probably haven't seen most of them. I've seen a few of them, and they're not particularly good. If you ever listen to the Now Playing podcast, which I highly recommend, by the way, it's a group of guys that do podcasts about various movie franchises and a lot of time horror movie franchises. They did podcasts for each of the Children of the Corn movies, and that's worth a listen to because they kind of clown on it and stuff like that, and they have a lot of fun insights. So if you haven't checked them out, check that out. And if you're curious about Children of the Corn movies, maybe listen to those podcasts rather than watch the movies. It might be time better well spent. But if you haven't seen the original, I would say at least check it out because it's well known enough for people to think of it as noteworthy. It's the name is noteworthy, and it's not a bad movie. So like I said, maybe a little slower than I remembered it being initially, and the acting maybe not as strong as I remember it being. Maybe perhaps I have more nostalgia for this one, like people do for Pet Sematary, and I'll own up to that. But check it out and let me know what you think of it. The next movie that we're going to talk about is called Who Can Kill a Child, and it's a movie not unlike Children of the Corn in that there's a group of creepy children involved. In this case, it's a British couple on holiday who go to this island that seems to be devoid of adults and just has these mysterious kids wandering around who are creepy. And then we'll leave it at that and not spoil it. But the movie is kind of notorious for being a tough watch. And has a bit of a cult following, so I was kind of excited to check it out. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't love the movie. I liked it; it's good, but I think my expectations were set a little too high based on its reputation because I don't think it lives up to the reputation. I should warn you, it starts out with actual footage of dead children or suffering children from like war and atrocities and famine and stuff like that. That A is very upsetting to watch, and B feels really exploitive. Exploitive. Given that the movie is not as deep or as meaningful as that intro would have you believe. The movie really is kind of an exploitation flick. It really is kind of a B movie style, scare flick of, this couple being terrorized by kids. And it's got violence against children, which I think is part of what gives it the reputation. Like, children are harmed in the movie, but it's not as graphic as I expected it to be. And honestly, like, I guess if seeing children harmed is a trigger for you, if it's something you're sensitive to, then this movie might be a tough watch. I already told you, man, I don't, creepy kids, I don't like them. So I don't know. I this movie didn't bother me, except for the beginning. The intro was troublesome. The movie itself didn't live up to that in terms of weightiness. And if it had the ambitions of being a message movie or making some sort of statement, I think it missed the mark. But as an exploitation flick, it's pretty good. I think I was expecting something more than just a straight exploitation flick, something kind of trashy. That's kind of felt to me. It kind of felt like a trashy movie that was maybe trying to be a little deep and missing the mark. So I was a little bit let down by it, but it's an interesting movie. And if you do like creepy children, it's probably worth a view. I should warn you, the children actors in this movie, not great. I think that the leads are pretty good, but the kids, like, they're acting like they're running around and stuff like that. They just kind of look like they're being told what to do. They don't really seem like they're locked in. And that kind of took me out of the movie too. So a fair warning on that one. So Who Can Kill a Child? Go ahead and check it out. Let me know what you think. If you do check it out, or if you've seen it, let me know what you think. But if you've heard about it and you kind of heard the notoriety of it, let me just kind of level set your expectations. Go in with a little bit lower expectations than what you might be thinking, because I didn't feel like it lived up to to the reputation. And I'd like to know what you think if you've seen it. Do you think it lives up to that reputation? Are you aware of the reputation? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And the last movie that I want to talk about today is Eden Lake. It's my last extra credit suggestion to you. And this is a movie I will recommend. I actually think this movie is really, really good, but it's a tough watch. It's unrelentingly bleak is the best way I can say it. Bleak is the word that kept coming to mind when I was watching it, and bleak is the word I'm left with after the fact. It's a bleak, bleak film. In short, it's about a couple that goes to the lake and runs afoul of a group of young teenage kids who decide to mess with them, and things escalate. It's got some strong violence in it that's a little tough to watch, especially when children are involved. Even though they're a little bit older children than a lot of the other movies we talked about here, they're still very much kids. But mostly the movie is frustrating. And I mean that in kind of a good way. It's a very frustrating movie that these people are in this situation. And like if you can identify with these people, it's frustrating because sometimes you're like, why are you doing what you're doing? Or how did you let things escalate to this level? And other times you're just like, I don't know what I would do in this scenario. I think part of the success of this movie might be how old you are when watching it. I think if you're in your teens or your early 20s and you're watching this, it may not hit for you as well as if you're a little older, if you're 30s, 40s, or older. I think you might relate better to the couple in the movie if you're a little bit older and kind of understand the frustrating aspect of this, the weird situation you find yourself in. And if you're younger than a teenager, you probably shouldn't be seeing this movie at all. But this movie hit for me. It really got under my skin in a way that few movies do. I really, really like this movie. I think it's a really effective movie. And it stars Michael Fassbender too. So if you like Michael Fassbender, you want to check this one out. But be forewarned. It's a bleak movie. It's just not a good time. It's not a feel good movie at all. And it's kind of notorious for that too. It's a little bit notorious for its bleakness. So it's part of why I'm mentioning it here. I almost put it on the syllabus, but just kind of missed off on it. But I do really like it. I do highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, let me know. Let me know if I'm overselling it a little bit because I really felt this movie to be very, very effective. I found it to be like shake your fist, clench your teeth, frustrating, and tense. And once it starts going, it really gets going until the end. And I don't want to spoil the end, but man, it's a gut punch. So check it out if you haven't seen it. Let me know what you guys think because I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts. So that's going to do it for our video on creepy children. As usual, I invite you in the comments to recommend some other creepy children movies that we didn't touch on here. Caveats, some of them, again, might pop up in other subgenres. As I pointed out, The Omen could have been in a different subgenre, but we put it here. There are other movies that have creepy children in there. Maybe not as the centerpiece, but maybe it's just a part of the movie. And if you want to mention some of those in the comments below, please do, because I like it when we share other suggestions with people so people maybe see movies recommended they don't know or aren't familiar with and just kind of wind up expanding their to watch list. I know that my personal to watch list is getting a little long because you guys have been recommending some really great stuff, and thank you for that. I'm trying to get onto some of it. That said, I'm also trying to watch some movies for the syllabus and be able to talk about them intelligently. So it's been a busy time, but that's not a complaint at all. Keep them coming. Keep the recommendations coming. I really appreciate that. Thank you guys very much for your attendance. I appreciate you guys very, very much. With all that said, until next time, class dismissed.